you mentioned, but we are seeing problems with citrus crops, and we're seeing problems with even infectious disease among crops. There's a disease called UG99, wheat stem rust, that is making its way across Asia right now, and if it reaches the United States, and some agriculture experts are afraid it will, then it could really devastate the wheat crop in America's breadbasket. So that's something to be concerned about. These things are happening right now, and our food supply is not as abundant as it used to be a decade ago, for sure.
Mike Adams, the health ranger. When we come back, I want to get into the whole discussion of Monsanto and soybeans and what's happened there and the deleterious effects on farmers. I think this is Weird Al and his Mike Adams. Before we jump into Monsanto, I don't know if you heard the tease there or not, but I mentioned about how people don't like to be preached at. I imagine you have to walk a fine line. You want to give information to folks. You want them to understand the healthy choices they can make, the unhealthy choices they most likely are making. You don't want to preach them to the point where you turn them off, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I do not preach to people. It's easy for me because I've been there. I've been in almost every kind of a diet. I was raised on a standard American diet, pizza and soda and hamburgers, and I've done 90 days of nothing but raw juices. I've been a vegetarian. I've been a vegan. I'm neither one of those right now. So I've been overweight, and now I'm healthy, and I can talk to people about what it's like to make that transition, and also explain to people why it's not your fault. You know, if you're suffering from a food addiction, which is very, very common, that's actually by design. There are certain chemicals that are put into foods to make you addicted. And a lot of people blame themselves, and they feel bad about their body shape or size or eating habits. And I try to explain that they really don't need to if you understand how the food supply is being manipulated. Then it empowers you, and you can start to make decisions and turn to superfoods to overcome some of those chemicals that have been put into the food supply. So,
well, give me some examples of those things that would make us addicted to particular foods.
Sure, yeah. One of the best is MSG, monosodium glutamate, and even though many people may be aware of MSG, they may not be aware of the new hidden form of MSG. See, the food manufacturers realize that people know about MSG, so they put on their soup cans now things like no MSG added, or you'll find it on other products, no MSG, and that's great. But they use another product, another ingredient that contains up to 14% glutamic acid, which is really a form of MSG, and that ingredient is called yeast extract. And today, if you walk around a grocery store and you look at cans of soup, and you look at even snack chips, and you look at packaged foods, you will find yeast extract in literally thousands of different products that are sold today. And those products can say no MSG, but they do contain yeast extract. You'll even find it in the natural products like soy burgers, which sounds like we're going to talk about soy pretty soon too, right?
Yeah, well, we can do that right now. This also goes back to that Food Inc. documentary that I saw and so many other people saw. A big chunk of it deals with soy farmers and Monsanto. And I found it amazing that a private company, a conglomerate, one of these giant agribiz companies, a chemical company, could patent soybeans, that soybeans could belong to one company.
Monsanto tried to patent a pig. I mean, they will patent life forms. They would patent half human cyborgs if they could. They will try to patent every form of life that's out there, and soybeans is no exception. And by the way, I just got to mention, George, you're such a polite and professional host. This is my first time to get to banter with you. I don't know if I'm going long or short, or if you have to interrupt me.
No. You go as we have lots of time here, so I want you to tell the story of Monsanto as you know it. In particular, I'm interested. What was most appalling is what has happened to farmers, who they're practically indentured servants. They're like sharecroppers.
That's the worst part of it, is that the honest farmers are being put out of business. They're being threatened with lawsuits. And here's how it works. Monsanto, like every other corporation, is in business to make money. So let's dispel any childlike ideas that any corporation is out there to help humanity. I've been around long enough to know that that's just usually not the case. They're in business to make money. And to make money, the best way to do that is to monopolize your industry, whatever it happens to be, pharmaceuticals or automobiles or computers, or in Monsanto's case, seeds. So they patent seeds, they monopolize seeds, and then build in technology into the seeds to make sure that farmers are dependent on them season after season. They have a technology called the terminator gene that causes seeds to self-destruct after one generation. That way farmers can't save the seeds and plant them the next generation. They're forced to go back to Monsanto and buy them again and again, year after year, and that, because the yields are often no better than regular crops, that puts many farmers on the verge of bankruptcy. But it's even worse. These genetically modified seeds that Monsanto puts out there, well, they're grown in the wild. They're not grown in quarantine, so their seeds are spread by the wind, and they cross-contaminate other crops grown by other innocent farmers who aren't even planting GMOs. But then, when Monsanto finds out that those innocent farmers are growing GMOs, Monsanto sues them for illegally growing their patented seeds. I mean, it gets so insane, and farmers have been put out of business, and they've been successfully sued by Monsanto for doing nothing wrong other than having their crops contaminated by the wind. Now, in an honest way, I think for people who have common sense, they would say, wait a minute, Monsanto is genetically polluting the world with these crops. They should be responsible for cleaning up the DNA contamination. They shouldn't be able to sue somebody for being polluted by those genes, but that's exactly what's happening today. So that's the backdrop for the Monsanto situation, and we can go into the seed acquisitions and how they're trying to monopolize the global seed industry next, if you want.
Is that where they're heading? A global seed industry?
Absolutely. They've acquired over 50 seed companies. Both Monsanto and DuPont are working to position themselves as the monopoly owners of virtually all seeds across our planet. And as a result of these efforts, the seed diversity in North America has plummeted catastrophically, to the point where many seed varieties have now plummeted by up to 98% of what was available 100 years ago.
Well, do you advise people to start stockpiling seeds, or it's too late?
Look, I think growing heirloom seeds is a very important survival strategy for human civilization. It's not just saving them and stockpiling them, but growing them and germinating them and having them living generation after generation and harvesting those seeds, sharing them with your neighbors. There are groups such as Seed Savers Exchange that are all into exactly this kind of philosophy, and I'm into it too. I grow food in Texas. I save seeds. I only grow heirloom seeds. I don't mess with hybrids and, of course, not GMOs. But even I'm threatened by DNA contamination from Monsanto's seeds. And the USDA, of course, goes in and gives Monsanto permission. They recently approved genetically modified alfalfa. So now here's another crop that's going to be planted in many areas across North America that's going to result in more DNA contamination of our continent. It is a crime against nature, I believe. That's my opinion, George. This is a crime against nature and against our people, and it's being conducted for profit.
Well, let's talk for a few minutes about meat. And people get really emotional about this. They wouldn't let you come and take your guns away. They sure as heck don't want you to tell them that they can't eat meat, especially red meat. There are, what has happened to the meat industry, you look at some of the documentaries that have been done in these undercover investigations, and it's just horrific. I mean, even some of the big companies you'd think are reputable, it's just horrific. Not only what happens to the animals, but it's no wonder we have so many outbreaks of E. coli and problems with meat. Meat's almost like a toxic substance. You can't leave it out on a counter. Restaurants can't store it in the fridge over any other kind of food. I mean, you got to treat it almost like with tongs or something and wearing a mask. Talk about the modern meat industry and what people need to know about how that bacon and that beef is raised.
Well, after studying this and doing a lot of research and a lot of writing on this issue, I've come to the conclusion that there are really two types of meat. There's fresh meat local grass-fed, free-range meat. And in my view, again, after a lot of research, I've come to the conclusion that there's nothing wrong with that kind of meat. But then there's the factory farm, processed, altered, chemically injected, hormone-grown, antibiotics meat that comes out of a factory. That stuff, in my opinion, is deadly. There are ingredients that are added to meats, such as sodium nitrite, which makes meats turn red. You'll find it in hot dogs and sausage and beef jerky. And that ingredient, we know, forms nitrosamines, which are cancer-causing chemical compounds in the human body. And that's why all the studies out there that you read about meat causing cancer, pancreatic cancer or colon cancer, for those studies, they don't differentiate between fresh meat and processed meat. Now, I think that would be a really interesting scientific study to say, hey, what about people who are eating farm fresh meat grown by local ranchers, or maybe they grow it on their own farm? Because in my experience in Texas, talking to ranchers, people who eat that kind of meat are actually very, very healthy, George. It's the folks who are eating the processed meat, the pepperoni and the packaged lunch meats and everything that's processed and has a long shelf life, they are the ones getting the cancers. They are the ones suffering the side effects of meat that are talked about in the studies. So I'm not someone who says all meat is bad. I think there's bad meat, and then I think there's meat that's relatively healthy. Now, the animal ethics issue, that's a different discussion. I'm just talking about the nutritional and health impacts right now.
Well, sticking with the nutritional part of it, you see the label organic this and cage-free that, and I never know what, I always try to do the right thing in shopping and do what's healthy and what's good for the planet, but you never know if the labels are real. I always get the feeling I'm being conned with that stuff, but I've seen enough programs and news stories about these smaller producers that organic farmers who raise meat and poultry and eggs that is healthy, but it's tough for those guys to compete against these gigantic agribiz conglomerates.
Well, your journalistic sense is absolutely correct. Your spidey sense, George. A lot of those labels are not honest, but it's difficult to tell which ones are and which ones aren't. I've seen exposés of so-called cage-free egg operations where they weren't cage-free at all. They still had cages. They were just let outside in rare moments. I've seen exposed cases of so-called organic dairy producers who would buy conventional cows that were injected with hormones and antibiotics and all these other things, and then they would put them on their organic farm for as little as 30 days and call the milk organic milk. So that's not honest either. There are many ways in which the labels are distorted, or there are loopholes in that. However, if you can find local egg producers, at your local farmers market or food co-op or community-supported agriculture, CSAs, that's where you can get honest food. But you got to be willing to pay more. And that's the thing. If a consumer always shops price, they will never get the quality meats or eggs or milk or vegetables that they really want in their bodies. If you just shop the lowest price, you're going to get the most processed junk that could ever be produced, and that's not good for you.
Well, the cliches would be you get what you pay for, and the other cliche, you are what you eat.
Yeah, both are absolutely true. I've made it a point. Now, personally, I've chosen not to eat beef, but I do buy beef for my dog. And I went out and found a local rancher who sells me beef that they grew right on their ranch, so I know the people, I know the ranch, I know where I'm getting it from. My dog is happy and healthy, and she gets raw bones and raw beef. That's what's great for dogs. So, even though I'm not a beef eater, I support beef ranchers who do it right and grow beef naturally.
I've seen sort of along the lines of what happened with soybean farmers in Monsanto, what's happened to poultry farmers. They sign these deals with the great big poultry companies, conglomerates, and then they have to raise their chickens or whatever according to how the company wants it raised. If they want it cage-free, if they want to just allow the chickens a little more, turkeys a little more room to roam around and live like a chicken or a turkey, the company comes down on them, and they too are like serfs. They end up deeply in debt to the company.